Good morning and welcome to the latest session on MemberWise. And today you're obviously plugged into the Membership on Track programme. The title of today's session is Repositioning Member Engagement as a Driver of Professional Development. And today's session is facilitated by ProTech. A big warm welcome to all network members. If this is your first session, just to talk you through what to expect, we're going to be here for an hour, and in terms of the functionality, you should be able to see the slides in front of you, and there's also a chat function on the right hand side. So if you've got anything that you'd like to talk about or discuss or put forward in the session, please do use that functionality. The volume control, you should be able to see that in front of you, and if you want to maximize the screen to actually show the slides bigger, you can also do that with that square arrow button just there. So in terms of the slides, they'll be shared with you directly by ProTech. So really just sit back and enjoy the presentation. Today's presentation is going to be delivered by Steve Shields. He's the Head of Sales and Marketing at ProTech. So if Steve, if you'd like to join us, that would be fantastic. While I just talk through the learning objectives. And good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Rich. Good morning, all.
Hello. So in terms of the overview of what people can expect for the next hour, we're going to be looking at how to remove the hurdles to member engagement by seamlessly linking your membership offering to professional development. We're going to look at how to realign your digital products to deliver tangible value to members that support their personal career objectives. And we're going to look at how to make the right technology decisions to retain control and eliminate even duplication as your organisation improves its member experience. So I think I'll be chipping in a little bit. I know there's elements of, Steve, your presentation where we're going to have a bit of interaction, but let me just hand over to you so that you can introduce yourself and the content for today.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. I'm just going to share my screen. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to ProTech's presentation today. Session, as Richard just alluded to today, is on repositioning member engagement to drive professional development. I first saw Rich present on professional development of member engagement probably in about 2016 at a user group that we hosted. And it was a really enlightening presentation, which our clients were scribbling notes on at the time. And member engagement for me has been a real big talking point within the sector over the last 5 years or so. But today we want to have a look at where that goes next and sense check whether there are ways in which we can use the tools, the materials, the logic that sits around member engagement and drive that towards professional development and what the outcomes are for your members of those engagements. So the agenda for today, I'm going to do a quick introduction to ProTech for those of you who may have not heard of us before. I'm going to be taking a look at the reason that professional membership bodies exist. I'm going to be taking a look at what drives members to join, and we've got a video of some members of various organisations who will be giving their opinions on what they get from their membership. We're going to be taking a look at the opportunity that we believe that exists within the marketplace to move beyond member engagement and use that as a tool for increasing professional development. And then we're going to finally look at how we will deliver that via tech. So before I go into the material, I just wanted to touch on why we feel at ProTech that we are qualified to talk on this subject. ProTech have existed within the not-for-profit sector for 25 years. We've been through a couple of economic downturns before, and I indeed joined the company just as the 2008 financial crisis was really taking hold in the marketplace. And equally, we like to think that we specialise in the area of professional awarding software solutions and the area of professional development. So it's an area of the overall offering of a membership professional body that we have a lot of knowledge on. And we've seen in the past how people have have reacted to times of hardship as we've had within 2020, and the experience, I'm sure, unfortunately, is something that we're going to be feeling the effects of into 2021 as well. So at ProTech, we have some quite long-term customers and equally some quite long-term members of staff. And it's those customers that we've seen go through the economic troubles that we're having now. Previously, organisations that were with us then are still with us now and have felt pain in the past, and therefore we've learnt lots of lessons from that in the past. And similarly, there's a core of staff at ProTech that have experienced this before. And indeed, as I say, I'm about to celebrate my 10-year anniversary at ProTech. So I've been through a cycle of economic downturn into a more economically stable period, and unfortunately now found ourselves where we are today. So moving into the presentation, what I wanted to do today is to step back and remind ourselves as to why membership bodies exist. What is the reason that your organisations are there for? What are they serving within the market? So I'm starting with a couple of generic examples of membership body definitions from the Science Council and from PARN, an outfit that some of you may be aware of. And it's fair to say that in both of the descriptions of why these organisations exist, they touch on very professional development-led wording, so oversight of knowledge, skills, practice in a profession. It's all very much driven around increasing the professionalisation of that member in the Science Council example. And in the example of PARN, very much promoting professional standards. So the underlying reason for being, it resides around professionalisation, and really that's a key theme for the session today. We want to take a look at how we achieve that professionalisation. So I've picked on a range of our clients to do a similar exercise here, and really step back and say, why do our clients exist? What is it that they're aiming to do for their members? And are we as an organisation achieving that? Are you as a member of staff at a membership organisation achieving that? And what the members think, and also Rich will be chipping in a little bit later as a key stakeholder within the market and giving some of his input as well. So I'm starting with the Chartered Management Institute, an organisation that I've worked with for a number of years, and I'm really proud of some of the member engagement they've done in the last 10 years or so. Looking at their reason for being, they are talking about business and education and inspiring people to become skilled in the area of management. So quite a broad, wide-ranging topic, but the essence of why CMI exists is to become skilled, and that's what is their driving factor. Moving on to the Institute of Risk Management, a very different professional sphere. But crucially, the reason for IRM existing is largely similar. They have globally recognised qualifications, trainings. They're looking to set professional standards, and they are looking to define knowledge, skills, and behaviour in the area of risk specifically. So more of a niche market, but the fundamental reason for being is based on that professionalisation of their members. And finally, I wanted to touch on the Society for Endocrinology, a membership outfit working in the medical space. And again, when we look at this particular organisation, they're looking to support their scientists and clinicians in their career and to demonstrate the value of endocrinology. So again, very much based on it being a support network. Career focus is what I've taken from their mission statements of each of the organisations I've mentioned so far today. And it creates for me a real sense that what everybody in the market has in common is a a drive towards a professionalization in some shape or form, and the products, the services, the engagement that you complete currently is ultimately driven towards that professionalization of the member. So we recently conducted a survey of membership organisations to understand and seek a consensus on where those organisations are in relation to membership as a whole at the moment and their current CPD professional development offering. And the first, most basic question in that particular survey was around the key reason for members joining their organisation. And we can see there that whilst networking and membership as an overall subject took a degree of the vote, the overwhelming winner there was career development, which suggests that employees, organisations, such the sorts of organisations that you work for, perceive that consistency of message with the mission statement. And if you don't mind, Rich, I'd just like you to chip in at this stage and see how you would have maybe answered that question, or any thoughts at this stage.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the reason that individuals or indeed organisations join these types of organisations is obviously typically one of three things that we've found. And typically you would join an organisation for help and support. So particularly for professional bodies, that would be a reason for joining. Another reason would be enhanced status, so professional status. And the third one would be to actually enable a collective voice. And certainly with what we've seen with the recent pandemic as well, there's much more emphasis on people actually focusing much more on the help and support element. And that would be aligned to the career development aspect, I think, to that. So that really does align quite nicely. The networking element may be a little bit less so, which does show through with your survey results. And those ones that don't know, that might indicate that maybe a couple of the organisations that took part in the actual survey, perhaps they need to actually reinforce those reasons, and that might go back to the, strip it right back to the core member value proposition of the organisation. So it really could be just something that could be handled with a comms campaign or something like that. So I'd say these results are not surprising. Certainly professional development has to be a raison d'etre, particularly for professional bodies. And it just shows you that mix that there is, that people obviously they remain or they join for very different reasons.
Yeah, I think that point around the help and support is really the essence of today's presentation. I've seen some great examples, especially with professional bodies that are quite practical in nature, providing real practical guidance and learning intervention. And it's been quite heartwarming for organisations to see organisations that were potentially worried about member retention, the natural cycle of people perceiving membership to not be important in the current climate, and the organisations that have been able to get on and provide that help and support have found that they've done really well in terms of that retention. So I first want to take a look at some of the goals that we've seen professional membership organisations bring to the table in technology projects that we've worked on in the last 5 years or so. You see quite a lot of similarity in what organisations are trying to achieve, and these statements really summarise that. So improved personalisation has been a real key driver over the last few years. That full digital experience of a membership organisation knowing who the person is and what they're all about when they visit your products and services. A focus on optimising member value and having a clear member value proposition is vitally important, and it is always a key driver for a technology project. Of course, new member acquisition and retention are key critical success factors within any sort of digital transformation style of project. And it certainly feels that there's been an enhanced focus on, rather than needing new tech to modernise and stay as part of a game, a driver on those outcomes in a project is what we've seen in recent years. And also, of course, a real driver to develop the digital experience alongside CRM solutions, so that you can perform that member engagement and ensure that members are getting that personalised service, that what they see is relevant, what they do and how they engage is relevant to them, of course, to drive that member retention. And of course, finally, their self-service has been a vital enabler for that, ensuring that members can go through that conversion funnel, become a member and consume products and services, has been really the driver of the last 5 years or so. So where are we now? This slide is designed to give what, in our experience, is where many organisations in the market either are or are fast getting to the point where they will be in the next 1 to 2 years. So this slide lays out the engagement tools that are enabling member engagement. On the left-hand side, we have a digital toolbox. So these are all of the interaction points that members have with you as an organisation. We've seen a lot of digital transformations that involve websites and member portals, and increasingly in the last 2 years, then we've started to see an increase in work around integration, so community platforms, resource centres, maybe learner management portals such as Moodle or Unicorn maybe. Certainly an explosion this year of e-assessment facilities, so organisations like BTL and their Surpass solution have done a great job of supporting organisations through to e-assessments. And then finally, apps, so mobile applications that allow members to engage. And that certainly feels where people are heading, if not there already. And that is enabling that seamless journey through the membership organisation, providing that fully engaged experience. And over on the right-hand side of the diagram, we have the CRM data that typically facilitates that. So the CRM system underpinning the digital toolbox to enable that personalisation and that sense of engagement that the member is hopefully taking from your organisation. Certainly feels as we work with new organisations and talk with more and more organisations that the market is getting there with these tools, that if it's not there at the moment, we will be soon. And certainly that's a consistent picture across our clients. Some will have a selection of things from the toolbox, maybe not all of them, maybe don't need all of them, or maybe aspire to get there, but that is the tech basis for driving member engagement. But what I do want to take a look at today is whether those tools are providing members with what they actually want from your organisations. And I'm going to be moving now into a 6 or 7 minute video, which harnesses the opinions of members, non-members, some engaged members, some disengaged members, and also one member toward the end of the video who has a membership at an organisation where there's a license to practice. So what we want to get a feel for is that digital toolbox, is that member engagement cutting through? What does that mean for levels of success with retained membership, essentially?
So when thinking about my industry, yes, I am aware of the professional membership body which serves it, though to be honest, I don't know a lot about it. I looked at it initially very early on in my career and I haven't revisited it much since. It's a strange one, but for me, in the position that I'm in within my company, I don't know how it would help me to progress further. Although I do see there may be benefits, obviously, if I was to look to move current roles, or particularly if I was to go and work internationally or abroad, then it might be something I'd be more inclined to look at. I guess probably the main reason, therefore, why I haven't joined is there hasn't been a need. I've managed to progress in my career so far without it. However, if it did ever reach a point where I needed some professional guidance, then it would be something I would look to. I think when thinking about what they'd have to offer, in terms of, why would I want to join? I think there'd have to be a very clear, defined impact on either job role or pay scale. So I wouldn't be able to reach a certain level without having that professional membership. I think if a professional membership body was to offer a chance where I could log my professional journey, I think that would be quite interesting, particularly because it's not always a linear journey. Sometimes it's quite sporadic, probably a truer picture for somebody wanting to join the industry, and also good to have, as a kind of background to my professional career.
I joined initially just to take part in the qualification that I wanted from them, which I successfully got in the end. I carried on with the membership for another year, and I don't know now if I'm going to carry on renewing it each year. I enjoyed the CPD part of it. I think it kind of forced my hand to do it. We don't really get an awful lot of time at work. We're too busy actually doing our work to be concentrating on professional development. And to be honest, it's not really at the forefront of my company's mind. There's a lot of reflection, which I quite like doing anyway, looking back on a project and going, oh yeah, that could have been better, we could have done this, going forward, we'll do this. So I did enjoy that side of it, but I still don't know if I'm going to renew. I think I'd be more inclined to do it if they were a bit more focused on, say, our personal development, less about theory, but we'll see. I don't know if that's their plan going forward, so...
I joined the membership organisation because I was looking at progressing my career. I've been a member for 2 years, and I've recently renewed my membership, which the cost was absorbed by my business because they see the value in being part of the membership organisation. I was planning to renew my membership even if they didn't pay the cost, because I'd like to get chartership. I do find the CPD difficult. It's on a different part of the platform to the main website, and it's quite convoluted how you register your time, and it's not clear before you do the work how many credits it will be to go towards the overall CPD time that you need to do for the year.
So, yes, I am aware of the professional membership body that supports my industry. I am aware of the things that it can offer from a career progression perspective, and sort of, what it can do for your CV and how it can elevate you in your career, and looking at higher level roles within the industry that you work in. One of the top reasons for me as to why I haven't joined it yet in my career is that I think there's a fine line between the weighting of experience versus qualifications. And I think in my particular career path is that I've experienced so far that experience often outweighs qualifications. So if I look at things like my degree, for example, that has had a bearing on my entry level role. But then after that, it's more of a tick box just to say that it's something I've attained. And I think for me to consider joining the membership body in my industry in the future, I'd have to see real tangible outputs as to how this is going to benefit me in my career progression, other than just being a tick box or something to put on my CV to demonstrate to future employers that that's a qualification I've obtained. On top of that as well, what the learning outputs are and how I can actually really apply that to my skill set and performing in my day-to-day role. Because as much as it's about demonstrating to my employers that I, have the skill set and have the knowledge and have that qualification, it's really about what I get out of it as an individual as well, for me to consider doing it in the future. If the membership organisation focused on logging my professional journey, would have been more interested. Potentially, again, I think, I'd divert that question back to the data side of things. And if it was logging my career progression, what does that say? And, can that give a clearer picture for my industry as a whole, not just me as an individual, but, what are the pain points for everybody across my industry in those particular job roles? So I'd say that would have a bearing on my decision for that.
So I joined my industry's organisation because it's quite a fundamental part of our it is a fundamental part of our professional development, but it's also quite an important part of our day-to-day offering for our clients. It's if you're a chartered member, your CV is stronger. It's deemed that is what the client deserves in their order to you, and it's also a way that we continue our learning. But also, if you're ever judged on if you're giving the right advice or if you're being negligent, it really comes back to what our organisation is saying. So it's a very important thing that we know what they want us to do, that we know what they say, that we engage with their learning. But it's also important for my personal professional development. It makes your CV stronger, it makes your bargaining power stronger. So it's pitched to us as quite an important thing that you are a member of the organisation. And I do think you should stay up to date. I don't think that when you join the professional, I think most people join a professional organisation quite young, in your 20s, when you're trying to really start your career. And I think sometimes you have to stay relevant. If you're 50 but you haven't learned anything from when you were 25, you're not providing the fundamental client care that you should. So that's how it's drilled into us and how we do it to stay up to date. So I do think there's benefits not only for your own personal development, that it makes your CV stronger and you get the benefits of that. It also helps you provide the client care that you should be providing to people. So overall, we have quite a positive experience with our institution and CPD, but because we value it, I guess if you didn't value it as much, then it might be a bit more taxing. But yeah, we're happy overall.
So really interesting set of opinions there for me, quite varied in nature, but there were some key takeaways. I feel that there was a very heavy emphasis on career, as we discussed earlier, and what the outcomes are for the member in particular. I thought the point from our non-member around being able to demonstrate learning outcomes and how the membership and the engagements then facilitate a key learning outcomes quite important. And that's where I'm heading within the presentation today. How do we drive and signpost those learning outcomes that people get from that member engagement? In the third video, as we went along there, we heard around the difficulty of tech. So the practicalities of doing CPD in particular can be quite challenging, and the reasons for doing so. So all in all, for me, quite an interesting snapshot of what's in the member's mind. And I know Rich has spoken in recent years on Generation Z. We did pick the audience specifically to get around that. People who have got some experience in the market, but are the members of tomorrow, and what are they looking for in shaping that video. So I have a slide in front of me now talking about membership alone not being enough, and by that we're really emphasising that point on networking, that networking can happen elsewhere, but it's got to be career driven is how we see that, and putting professionalisation at the heart of the membership offering, and ensuring that those members are perceiving that value from that proposition in the context of professionalisation. So I'm just going to spend a few moments. I'm sure we're all aware of the challenges of the current economic climate, but we feel that in particular this creates an opportunity. So there's some quite scary stats on the screen at the moment around the rate of unemployment. 1.5 million people being unemployed, and the fact that there are 150,000 fewer 16 to 24-year-olds in unemployment. These stats are taken from a recent Aviva survey of the marketplace. So I'm sure I don't need to labour the point that we are in a challenging time at the moment with regards to the overall workforce of the economy. And of course, that has the risk of if the perception of your membership offering is not good or not focused on professionalisation, reduction in new members, and a reduction of members maintaining their membership. But that's not where we want to go. We want to make sure that those numbers or those arrows are pointing in the opposite direction. And herein lies the opportunity. So in that Aviva study, they took a look at what they expect to happen in the marketplace within 2021. And specifically, that survey suggested that 53% of workers plan to make some sort of career change in the next 12 months. And we saw this coming out of the recession of 2008 to 2010. There was a whole host of reskilling and people moving into new markets. I know I've certainly spoke to membership organisations this year that have seen that practical shift already starting to take place. So organisations that are maybe supporting markets that are a bit more independent. As people are maybe coming out of the workforce, they're moving towards a more do-it-yourself way of achieving employment or starting their own businesses, and that creates an opportunity for the whole sphere of learning and professionalisation that maybe in the last few years where people are maybe a bit more static, you know, where member engagement and keeping people going in their membership has been the driver. Overwhelmingly, there's an opportunity to support that career change, and indeed a huge 31 million members of the population are expected to aspire to retrain and or learn new skills in 2021. So that shows there's a real driver towards learning fundamentally, and therein lies the opportunity. Similarly, it's a lesser number, but there is an expectation that nearly 3 million workers will be looking to gain academic qualifications within the next 12 months. So again, if you offer academic qualifications, great. There's some great awarding organisations that I work with and beyond, but fundamentally tagging that qualification to a wider scheme of professionalisation will enable people to drive that value. We saw with one of our members in the clip that the driver for joining their organisation was a qualification, but it didn't feel like they were perceiving too much value beyond that. So for those 3 million people that may enter our market, we've got to ensure that we give a holistic movement forward out of taking that initial qualification into real practical engagement, but making sure that engagement is relevant and supporting that member in their professionalisation. So how do we go about putting professional development at the heart of member engagement? The key question that I want people to ask themselves is your value proposition focused on tangible outcomes that support a member's professional development? If the answer to that question is no, then that's going to likely lead to that downward arrow in terms of member retention. What we really want to be doing is making sure that the members are perceiving that professionalisation element, so that they're getting the practical support that Rich mentioned earlier in order to continue and further and do all of those things that the Aviva study suggests in terms of creating an opportunity. So I'm going to move out now from professional development as an overarching reason for being into continuing professional development, which typically in my experience is deemed to be more of a productized solution that membership organisations offer. So CPD is really the endpoint of evidence in the professionalisation that the member is going for, and it's a definitive recording of what they've done in order to evidence that professionalisation. So I just want to reframe at this stage the member engagement slide that I had on screen earlier with the digital toolbox and the supporting CRM functions. What I tend to see, what ProTech tend to see as we work with our customers and talking to different organisations in the market, is that CPD as a product hasn't really kept pace with the digital transformation that's taken place in the last 5 or 6 years. Quite often, CPD still sits outside of that area, and quite often can be completed by members in Excel spreadsheets that they may upload somewhere or send in, or quite a rudimentary way of them evidencing that CPD. So I'm going to move back to my survey of membership organisations now. What I wanted to take a look at was, is that point valid? Does the CPD sit outside of that overall world? Is it less of a consideration? And we asked, what is the primary limiting factor in delivering effective CPD? And the answers here, we can see that unsure came out quite high on the list, alongside perceived importance to members, and finally the bit where I come in, which is the technology. So what does that mean for me? That suggests that there's a perception that people don't really see the point in CPD, but the members that we've just heard from, the reason for being is professionalisation. So something doesn't quite marry up there. In the members don't perceive CPD as important, but one of the key reasons for joining and retaining membership is professional development, and the reason for being is professional development. That suggests that there's a mismatch in expectations that we need to overcome here. And again, Rich, if I can invite your views on that particular point.
Yeah, so in terms of where we are with CPD, I mean, over the years, I mean, we've seen mainly with professional bodies now, and I know sometimes it sits outside of that, but if we're looking at it from that viewpoint, if you like, we've seen organisations, they started to get a little bit more sophisticated. So if you go right back in time when it came to CPD, it possibly was informal, it wasn't recorded, it was just done in the background, and it was just left to the individual. Then the professional bodies kind of came in and said, right, okay, well, we're going to come up with a framework for you. So in the early days, maybe they would have hours, or they would have points or something like that. And very much they would have to do a certain number each year. The sector then moved into looking at outputs. So if you like, kind of what comes from this learning, you know, maybe I've got a qualification in something, or maybe I've got a certificate or something like an accreditation. And rightly, and I think out of all of those members, if I look at all of them that were talking in that session, in that video that you've got there, the most poignant very much was Dan, you know, him literally saying in not so many words, what's in it for me? And if I can't see what's in it for me, I'd rather spend my money somewhere else, thank you very much. And that is a massive, massive cultural change from a membership perspective, because for many years, many membership organisations, the members, and as I say, I talked about the requirement for, if you like, enhanced status, you know, post-nominals, all those things. That used to be something that was seen as more important, but as we move into this help and support element, particularly during the current period, everything needs to be front of mind. Now, I mean, 34% perceiving the importance to members, that really should have been higher. And it's down to those organisations to maybe reinforce why CPD is important. And certainly when it comes to, and I'm thinking now like the medical membership bodies, you know, the bottom line is, if you're better at your knowledge and your insight and your skill, you will save more people's lives. You know, it really maybe needs to be brought at the forefront, rather than the fact that you're just doing CPD. You mentioned there, Steve, about this kind of a lag from a CPD perspective when it comes to the kind of the spend on tech and the move forward. And I've got to say, I think possibly maybe one of those reasons might have something to do with a lot of, certainly the big membership bodies, the big professional bodies, a lot of them still working very much in silos, and perhaps needing that person within the professional development area to really get that requirement for tech. That might be something to do with that lower percentage. We're seeing those walls crumble. You know, we are seeing, you know, organisations on our membership plus CPD plus regulatory, all of those different functions now talking to each other. And certainly from a CPD perspective, maybe being a little bit more membership friendly. And I know from my time, you know, you kind of very much, you had your membership people and you had your CPD people, and, you know, there needs to be a real need to kind of get us all together. Revenue generating ability, I think in terms of the sector, we're now seeing the de-risking of non-subscription income as a priority. So when it comes to membership bodies actually earning income outside of subs, we're seeing that increase, and obviously CPD opportunities are an obvious place to be able to do that. Slightly disappointing to see the strategic importance being at 10%. Really, as professional bodies, the actual prioritisation of CPD, it needs to be a critical element of what they're providing. So it would be nice to maybe see CPD having a bit more of a profile when it comes to that more sort of strategic move forward for organisations, and particularly at the moment, you know, with organisations not having maybe those traditional streams, for example, conferences and trade exhibitions, that kind of stuff. I think maybe there's the need for a focus on this. So hopefully that input was helpful, Steve.
Yeah, I think just to echo some of those points there, certainly moving out of the last downturn, we saw an increase in qualifications and events within our client base, not professional development as such. And certainly you've read my mind on a slide that's upcoming around that siloed mentality and where professional development sits. And just to echo that medical point you made there, Rich, the last member was not a medical member per se, touched on that client care and importance of the membership offering to the client base. It just shows that real tangible learning can result in the member providing real tangible knowledge to their marketplace and move forward, which just as a secondary, whilst the emphasis of the video was quite individualistic, there's a secondary element of, if I'm going to be good at my job, I need to be able to do X. And that drives from the professional development that the organisation is mandating to that particular member. So moving quickly on to a next quicker question, we asked the audience whether they perceive that CPD is a time-consuming task for members. I was quite surprised at this because feedback that I've had elsewhere was that overwhelmingly that CPD can be a bit of a drain on members' time. But the perception from the survey was that actually, no, it's not a time-consuming task for members to complete. Not too sure what to make of that point in particular. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that at all, Rich.
Yeah, so CPD, it's a funny one, isn't it? And I mean, I know just to give a practical example of it. I mean, my dad was a dentist. He had to undertake CPD. He very much felt when he was kind of moving forward through his career, it was done to him. It was a kind of a grunt thing. I have to do it. And you know, in terms of that perception, we really do need to change that. And again, going back to some of the members that you could see in your video there, they're very much looking out for or answering that "what's in it for me" question. And certainly, as you say, Steve, if you can actually communicate those clear outcomes from participating in CPD, then perhaps that perception of CPD being done to people, rather than it actually being something that can help them, perhaps that kind of mentality can change. And certainly, I mean, I know I'm working with a membership body at the moment who's got branches out in New Zealand. And one of the actual outcomes from CPD of that organisation is that they actually receive an increment in their salary. You know, that's another way that can be recognised. You know, maybe that's a little bit extreme, but you know, in terms of that driver, it all really comes down to that. And particularly when at the moment when people are thinking, what's in it for me? What do I get from this? Why should I do it? It's difficult now. So some professions are regulated. Very much that is what it is. You know, you will have to do this, otherwise you can't practice. So that's very much a sort of stick to kind of push it forward. But for those organisations perhaps that have not got that, so actually CPD might be something that can be done with multiple providers, or actually it isn't mandatory. That makes the actual, if you like, the exercise even harder, because we've got to try and emphasise, or if you like, incentivise people to take part in it. And if you're in that specific boat where you don't have to do it, you don't see the point in it, you know, that could be really challenging for membership bodies. So they really do, like you say, Steve, they need to be looking at communicating those outcomes, and perhaps that clear member value proposition, you know, as the rock that's a starting point, and then put that engagement piece around it, maybe.
Yeah, and hopefully in a few moments' time, I'll present on how we can make that easier to put that at the heart. So we touched on some of these challenges there as Rich was talking, actually, and stole my thunder. But I'm just going to reframe some of the messages here. So the anecdote that Rich gave there, very similar to anecdotes that I've had around CPD being arduous. No, certainly I was sitting with my girlfriend's father a few weeks ago, and he was having a right moan about his CPD. If that organisation heard his reaction, they'd think again on what CPD was like. Data captured around e-learning, e-assessments can often be siloed. So the digital transformations occurring, there are more tools coming into that digital toolkit, but is the data being joined up? You've got good interventions taking place, but are they being played back to the member? Fundamentally, members are manually devising what they perceive to be professional development, and they may be doing small tasks out in their job, or doing minor interventions with yourselves as organisations. And are those making it to the CPD record? Are they tracking that as professional development? Quite often we see as an internal thing, as you alluded to there, Rich, that CPD isn't intrinsically linked to all of an organisation's products and services. It's often seen as a thing that people do in their own right. So maybe there's some links to events, but not as wholeheartedly as it potentially can be. That key point there around CPD being no magic within an organisation, it sits somewhere in between those traditional membership events qualifications, and therefore who's the champion internally of CPD being the driver for member engagement, member retention, and so on. And then on a practical point, we've got that evidence checking can be problematic. Certainly seen organisations that have stopped checking CPD, that actually the perception is that we'll get members to do it, we'll put it over here, but we won't follow that up. And that all leads to that perception that CPD sits outside of the ecosystem of what a membership organisation offers. And then finally, Rich, you touched on hours and points, and certainly the world's moved towards reflection somewhat, but getting a real clear and coherent why are we asking people to do this professional development is sometimes a barrier to entry for CPD. So just to reframe where we were earlier, we've got our digital toolbox and CRM data driving member engagement, but our CPD record perhaps sitting alongside that, or a little bit away, or not really sitting at the heart of the ecosystems of solutions you may have. And where we believe that should reside, in order to get that experience laid out to the member and making CPD a seamless part of your membership offering, CPD should sit at the heart of the digital offering, and that everything that you do within the digital toolbox and the CRM solutions should be driving towards playing back to the member the value that they've taken from those interventions, either out there in the shop window, in your various solutions, or in the data that you've collected, to bring together a real record of what those people have done with you. Now, ultimately, that sounds a little bit like a member value statement, but it goes beyond that. It's the reason then of why did they do that? What did they get out of those interventions? And making sure that people understand that they did those interventions in the first place is really important to me. So within our CPD sphere here, we have what we call the CPD repository. So we believe the first step on that road is to hoover up all of those good bits of knowledge and interventions that you have in the digital toolbox, in your CRM data, and make sure that they're contextualized within the the paradigm of CPD. So I always like to take the point on the resource centre. Many organisations that we work with and many in the sector will have either a resource centre or a knowledge hub or some form of repository of good, tangible learning that a member can go along, they can read, they can consume, they might be able to comment on with other members. That content might even get served up to them if member engagement is really slick and you read this article, therefore go and read this article. But the question then becomes, because why? If we're not playing back to that member that they have received some value from that, then it may miss the point in terms of retention and acquisition, talking in sort of hard-nosed business terms. But ultimately, it's very, very likely that those great things that we've got now out there that people can consume are not being signposted as increased professionalism. So taking those interventions, bringing those into the CPD repository, being able to interrelate those items so that people can see a clear pathway from this intervention to that intervention to that intervention. And also being able to tag those interventions to key learning outcomes or themes will allow you to contextualize all of the good stuff that you've got from a member engagement perspective into a more professional sphere, if you like. Then as people consume your products and services, those automatically land in the CPD record. So you have an interactive log of the interactions that people have done. So when they go back into maybe their member profile and they take a look at their CPD record, they're presented with the things that they've done in relation to your organisation that have benefited their career specifically. That leads by linking items together towards next actions. So we saw you did this, therefore would you like to do that? Within that CPD record, it's possible to create a space for reflection. So we saw that you read this article. What is it about that enabled you to move forward in your career? And again, we heard from our members earlier who spoke about the real practical advice that they're getting. If we can take that one stage further and allow them to evidence that seamlessly and interactively, then that makes the arduousness of CPD less for the member, but also reminds the member of the value that they're getting from you as an organisation, which fundamentally is the outcome that we're looking for from member engagement anyway. So we see CPD as the contextualisation, the cherry on the cake, if you like, of all of the good stuff that's been going on in the market in the last few years to create that digital toolbox, to get those systems in place, but then play it back to the member with terms of real tangible outcomes. So moving back to our survey, we asked a question on whether organisations are tracking at an individual member level the interactions with online resources. And what I found interesting here was that obviously 30% said no, but if we take the 30% and the 40% and put those together, that suggests that 70% of organisations have online resources, but they don't know who's read them. They don't know who's consumed them. They don't know who's interacted with them. That's certainly consistent with my experience where marketing departments in the sector, they'll know which is a popular resource or which is a popular page on a site, but getting down to that individual level interaction isn't necessarily being consumed. And without that information, it feels to me like we are missing a trick here, that these individuals are consuming this information for a reason. Typically that's because they want to learn something, and therefore that perceived importance to members that we spoke about earlier, let's up that by giving them real tangible outcomes from the good stuff that you have there available. And again, Rich, if I can invite you to comment on that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of this result, what this says to me basically is that the no's and the partials is possibly not because they don't want to, but it's probably because they actually can't, and they probably don't have the technology in place to be able to provide them with that functionality. And this links to a bit of a bugbear that the networks have for a long time, where you've got a mixture of legacy systems and processes in place, which make it sometimes very difficult to bring all this data together. And hence why I think you said earlier that your better half, she was telling about actually having to, fill in a spreadsheet or something. Now, I think, we need to move from that. Certainly when we, the last time, about a year ago, we temperature checked the membership sector on their spend on tech. We estimate that really the sector should be aspiring to be spending up to 10% of annual income on tech, and the elements that we're talking about today, they include CPD, but in reality the amount that we're spending is only between 2.5% and 3%. So that underinvestment, that could be one of the answers that really mean that this answer is so, that at the moment they don't have the infrastructure to be able to do that, despite perhaps maybe wanting to. That's what I take from this anyway, Steve.
I think fundamentally it is a tech problem, but I think there's also a connecting the dots here between the services that are out there and the reason why people will consume them, and joining that together to be very clear on the value proposition. So I think it is a mixture of both. The tech's there to do it if it's invested in, but I think it's that compelling reason for doing so as well, which is as important and drives the business case for investing in that tech fundamentally. So then the final question that we asked was, do you have the resources to offer best-in-class CPD? And just to echo the point really there on the spending, I guess, an overwhelming 80% of individuals who took the survey suggested that the current infrastructure will not allow a best-of-breed CPD solution. So again, that creates that or reinforces your message, I guess, there, Rich. So just to finish off the session, how do we overcome this problem? We see the problem being as much about how CPD is or the importance of CPD, I guess, to the organisation. So we always start with discover what professional development means to members within your sector. Ensure that you are offering the right products and services is obviously a given, and certainly in some of the work that we've done with our sister product Lean 3S, we find that surprisingly that isn't always the case, that members are actually looking for something different to what you're providing. So there's a perception that good tech and member engagement is happening, but it's not necessarily hitting the spot. So you've got to make sure that the value proposition is solid, and that won't go away. But fundamentally then, what we're suggesting is that the value proposition should be redefined around professional development. We can see that's the reasons why your organisation exists. We can see that's what members want. Therefore, the value proposition has got to be a very clear pathway from the products, the services, the interactions that you have with members to that professionalisation. Then you've got to take a look at your ecosystem and ensure that processes, products and services integrate and bring that CPD data together. And then finally, you're going to need a technology partner that can bring that data together and understands the reason for bringing that data together into that central hub, so that you can begin to start playing that back to members, making that more interactive and building on all of the good work that's been done in recent years, and ensuring that members are perceiving that value, hopefully in the context of professional development. And before I leave this slide, I just want to, as we finish the presentation today, just make you aware of the link at the bottom of the screen here. You'll be able to watch the webinar again from that link in due course. And there are also some helpful resources on that page that are completely free to download and take, and just encourage the audience to take a look at that page, and hopefully there's more learning beyond my session today. And that then brings me to a close.
That was fantastic, Steve. Well, thank you for your time today, and in terms of the insight there. And it was really lovely actually to be able to sort of put CPD and professional development at the fore, actually, because a lot of the content that we focus on is obviously membership, and just adding that kind of CPD and professional development element to it, I think is really nice, and it's so important for the professional bodies that we represent. So you know, in terms of your support today, a big thank you to ProTech for actually supporting this session, and we couldn't do it without you. And as I say, what we'd also recommend is, obviously you're watching this today through the Membership on Track portal. You can actually find ProTech's profile within the Solution Centre. So if you want to take a look and find out some more about them, you can do that there. And equally, as I say, ProTech will be circulating these slides so that you can actually run through them, perhaps in your own time, perhaps with team members. And equally, the session as well would be available on demand. So please do come back to this, and you know, perhaps rewind to a certain part that maybe is more specific, and use those really, really rich, great survey results to actually inform and perhaps even influence stakeholders within your organisation to take those changes. So from our perspective, thank you very much. Thank you for tuning into today's session. Thanks to Steve for presenting and providing us with his insight. And we'll look forward to working with ProTech and delivering more fantastic sessions over the coming weeks. So thanks, and take care. We'll see you soon.